All right, folks, this is part two of the chapter seven guided program development. Um, in this part, we're going to be adding code to the user interface that we developed for the expeditions application. So I am just going to go out to my flash drive, Visual Basic folder, my chapter seven folder, and open up my scuba expedition solution. And we're just going to get right into it and start coding. Think I did in the previous video. I did just one line of code to show you how the splash screen works. We just put a pause in there, um, but we'll really be digging into some of the code in this video. A lot of code in this application. I think we've got about 300 lines of code, so I'll try to go as fast as possible while still making it not too complicated for you. So let's get going. So the first thing we want to do is turn option strict on. We already have our comments in here. And the first thing we need to do is create some class variables. And we're going to declare these class variables a little bit differently than we have um, in previous applications. Um, So normally when we declare variables, we declare them with the dim keyword. Really when you're declaring class variables, you want to declare them using the private keyword. And all that means is these variables are private to this class form scuba. And in most of our applications that we've built, um, and probably for the next couple chapters, we just have one class. But as we get into more advanced object-oriented programming, you can have multiple classes. And if you want the variables to be local to the class, you have to declare them as private. So we're going to declare all our variables as private here. If you're looking in the book, they're using an underscore to delineate that these are private class level variables. I'm not going to do that. Um, I think it just makes things more confusing. So we've got about, let's see, about 9 variables. So I'm just going to put a comment in where class variables. And again, we're going to say private int 4-hour consider 4. And just to make things a little faster for myself, I'm going to copy and paste this twice. I have 4-hour, 6-hour, and 8-hour. Eight. I'm going to do a couple things like this throughout the code just to make things faster because I'm not the fastest typer in the world. So this one, obviously 4 hours should be 4, 6 hours should be 6, and 8 hours should be 8. And these are just values that are associated with some of the different dives. So there's a 4-hour dive, a 6-hour dive, and an 8-hour dive. I'm going to use these to populate list boxes later. And then we have our 6 different dive, I guess it's really dive locations or within the locations, the places where we can go diving. So I'm going to do private again. String one string. First dive is Great Barrier Reef. And we have 6 of these. So again, I am going to save myself a little time and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just name these 3, 4, 5, and 6. So this is just going to save me a little bit of typing. And we have tiger shark. You can type these all out if you want. Some of you are probably much faster typers than I am. And then fathom chasm. Fathom, not chasm. And after fathom chasm, we have great blue chasm. Blue chasm, and then rainbow reef. Rainbow here for a reef. And then the last dive is the Mina sunken ship. All right. So we've got all of our class variables. So the next thing we're going to do, so I'm going to do a quick save all. And you'll notice I'm doing save all quite a bit. And it's a good idea to get in the habit of it in case anything happens. So your work is saved. And if you get to reboot or start things up, at least you don't lose too much work. So now we're going to double click on our combo box and we're going to add the code to populate those different dives in the list box. And you'll notice when I double clicked on the combo box, it didn't create a click event. It created a select index changed event. So that means this code is going to fire when you change the value in that combo box rather than when you just click on it. Because you don't want it to fire when you click on it because um, what the user is really doing is selecting a value from there. So you want the code to fire after the user selects the value. Um, and you grab the value, or in this case, the index of that value, which is going to be 0, 1, or 2. And then you populate the value based on, or you populate the list box based on what they selected. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to declare, let's put a comment in here. Say, allows the user to select location and populates list box with dive types. It's really all we're doing. So when the user um, selects a drop down, we're just going to populate the list box with the appropriate dive types. There's each location, Fiji, Belize, and I forget what the other one is, has a subset of these. So a couple are specific to specific locations. So we want to populate it properly. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to declare a value. And this we're going to go back to dim because we're not using class variables. We're using just a local variable here. We're going to say dim location choice. As integer. And now we're going to populate that location choice with the value that they selected from the drop-down box. And what we're not going to actually grab the value. We're going to grab the index, which is going to be 0, 1, or 2. And then we're going to use that in a case statement to call subprocedures. So I'm going to say int. So we're going to use our int location choice. And I'm going to set that equal to CBO. What did I call my, oh, I called it CBO combo box. This should be CBO location choice. So if you were following along, why I did that, you can change that. So now CBO location choice selected index. That's just going to get the index value of that combo box and put it in a location choice variable. We're going to clear out our div list box. So we're going to say lst div dot items dot clear. And now we're going to write a little case statement. Select case. And we're going to base that case on our int location choice because that's what we put in there from combo box. And case 0, which is our first item, it's our Australia. So here we're going to put in a procedure call for Australia team. Now we have not created this procedure yet. So when I type the name of it in, we're going to get a little squiggly. We're going to go down later and create that procedure. So in the book, it doesn't use a naming convention on procedures. I like to use naming conventions on procedures, and I think it's going to make it easier for you to use a naming convention. So I'm going to call this procedure PRC procedure, and then Australia team. Spell that right? Okay. As I said, we're going to have little squiggly saying Australia has not been declared because we haven't created it yet. And that's okay. We're going to go ahead and create it next. And then we're going to say, we're going to have 3 of these, Australia, Belize, and Fiji for our 3 locations. So PRC, Belize, team, and procedures all have parentheses in there. When they're haven't been declared yet, you have to put the parentheses, or they haven't been created yet, you have to put the parentheses in there because Visual Studio doesn't know what it is that you're creating, even though we know it's a procedure, but we haven't created it yet. So we have to put those parentheses in there. And then case two, TRC, Fiji team. Okay. So now we end select. Go and look at the code here. Next thing we're going to do, so we've got this. Next thing we're going to do is make a bunch of the items in the window visible. So we'll put a comment in, make objects visible. So we've got a bunch of objects we need to, and we're going to do a couple things. We're going to make some objects visible, we're going to clear some labels out, and we're going to set the focus. So LBL team visible true. And again, don't worry too much about the errors we're getting down here. We're going to clean those up when we actually create the variables or the procedures. Txt team visible true. Label select. And basically, to make a bunch of labels visible. This is the tedious part for people like me who don't like typing. Make our list box visible. Button visible, or buttons. Have costs. Clear. We have labels, 3 labels. Label, oops. Scuba dive dot visible true. Cost visible equals true. And label length. These are basically just all the objects that we hid in the previous video. We want to only make them visible when the user selects an item. And now we want to clear out our labels. I'm going to save myself a little bit of time here and just copy these. Okay, paste those three in. I'll set the text value of our three labels to blank. Remember, we put all X's in them. And we're ultimately going to be populating them. Okay. And then set the focus on our text box. So the user is going to be selecting a value from the list box, and then they're going to enter the number in the team. So we want to set the focus on the text box. Comment in here, set focus on text box. All right. So that is all for this sub procedure. Got a couple extra lines here. Clean that up. And now what we want to do is create our three procedures that we put in procedure calls for up here. So this is just a call to the procedure. We want to create the actual procedure, and we have to do that um, outside of our button here, or our not our button, our combo box sub procedure. So I'm going to go down here below the end sub, and I'm going to say, so it's a sub procedure. So I'm going to say private sub for sub procedure, and then PRC, and we called it Australia team. And you'll notice now that I've done that, if we go up here, we lose the squiggly for the red squiggly for Australia team, because we now have this procedure defined. And all we're doing in here is adding items to the list box for Australia, which is the first three items here, dive 1, dive 2, and dive 3. So this is just kind of a way of breaking up our code, making it easier to understand. So let's put a comment in here. I'm going to say populate the dive types for Australia. For some reason, I am having a hard time spelling Australia. All right, so what we're going to do here is say list dive dot items dot add. Sorry about that. And we're gonna just add string 1, string dive 1, string dive 2, and string dive 3. So what I'm gonna do here, again, to make things a little faster for myself, I'm gonna copy this line of code. And that's all we're doing here. So we're gonna change this one to dive 2, and the next one to dive 3. So that's going to just populate that list box with the first three values, when we select case when the first item in the combo box is selected, we're going to call this procedure. It's going to jump down to here and do this. So we have two more of these. We have one for Australia team, and we have one. We have one for Belize team, and we have one for Fiji team. So again, to save myself time, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it right below. And I'm going to actually do that twice because we're creating two of them. All I have to do is come over here and change this to Belize. And when we do this, we get an error up here on this one because we have two Australia teams. That's okay. And we're going to change this one to Fiji. Okay, so now these. Good. Oh, Belize Ream. Belize team. Fiji team. Fiji with a J. Spelling counts, folks. All right, so we don't want to populate these two with string dive 1, 2, and 3. They use different ones. So Belize is only has two values, and it is 4 and 5. So I'm going to change this to 4 and this to 5. And then our Fiji is 2, 3, and 6. So we use a subset of those first three values. 2, 3, and 6. So now we should have no errors here if we spelled everything the same. So the important thing is whatever you, um, however you name it here has to be exactly the same as you name it here. Spelling doesn't really matter in Visual Basic. If we were doing this in C#, spelling would matter, but it doesn't matter here. If you spell something a little different, it will correct it for you. So that's it for that. So let's run this and try it out to see what happens. I like to run my code after I've done a chunk of code just to make sure everything's working properly. So what we should see here is when we click on this select index changed after we select an item, it should display all the objects in this area here and populate the list box with different values based on what we select. So we'll select Australia. We see Great Barrier Reef, Tiger Shark, and Fathom Chasm. And if we set Belize, we should see those two values, and then there's a subset in Fiji. So just looking at this with data in it, I see a couple things we need to clean up. We need to make this list box a little bigger. I need to make the text box, move the text box over a little. So I'll stop this and do that now. Just going to move this over slightly. And I'm going to make my list box a little wider. Let's see, let's run this again. Make sure it looks better. There we go, Fiji. Good. All right, that looks better. We just had, I think our label here was overwriting our text box. Now this looks a little better. All right, so that's good. We clean that up. So what's next? So now we are gonna write the code in our dive cost button. This is going to be the brunt of the code that we're going to be writing. We are going to be calling, let's see, it looks like one, two, three functions in here, um, and a couple, um, actually one, two, four, five functions. Looks like we're going to be calling in this one. So first, let's put our comments in to just explain what we're doing in this button. So we're going to say determine the cost of the expedition and display size and length of dive. All right, so got some variables to declare here. Dim, int, team size, as integer, one word, int team size. Dim, oops, having a tough time typing tonight. Dim, BLN for Boolean, number in team is valid. In team is valid. Word. And we're going to say as Boolean equals false. I'm going to do another dim Boolean. So if you don't remember, Boolean has two values, true and false. What we're going to be using these variables for is return values for some functions that we're going to use to check if the values that are being entered were correct. So we were doing this error checking and validation all within your buttons. And now we're going to kind of break those validations up into functions, which will make things a little cleaner. It's a little more work at first, but as you get to bigger applications, it's really nice to kind of put all your validation in a function, so then you can call it multiple times um, if you have different things you need to validate. In the last chapter we worked in, I think it was the down payment for the house application. There were like 4 text boxes that you had to validate. And that can be a lot of work. So this is going to save you a little time when you get to bigger applications. So we're going to say Boolean dive is selected. Keep wanting to put a space in here. Dive is capital is selected as Boolean equals false. I'm going to declare a variable for our dive choice. another variable for our selected team. We're just going to set that to a blank value. There's another variable for our location choice. We have our length of our dive. And then finally, our cost. All right. So now we're going to do our first function call. Previously, we did a procedure call. Function calls are a little different because we have return values. So when we have a return value, we have to set our function equal to a variable. And in this case, we're going to use our Boolean value that we created earlier. So we're going to say Boolean BLN, number in team is valid. Okay, so we're going to use this variable and we're going to set it equal to our function, which we don't have yet. Oops, what just happened? FNC and validate number in team. And we have to have these parentheses in here. And let's put a comment in here for this. Call to in the team. And again, we have a red squiggly because we have not um, created this function yet. We will do that later. Once we create it, this should be fine as long as we spell it correctly. And this function does not have any arguments. So if there were arguments that we were passing to this function, we may pass some of these. Once we populate these variables, we can pass them into the function and do something with them. We don't need to in this one. So we won't worry about that yet. So it's our first validation that we do. And then we're going to do another one. So call function to ensure the dive was selected. We just want to make sure they've selected a dive before they hit calculate. We're going to use our Boolean again here. No, actually we're not. We're going to use int dive choice. We're going to pass a Boolean in. So int dive choice equals FNC. Oops, what just happened? FNC validate, dive, selection. And in this one, we are passing in some arguments. We're going to pass in two arguments, our Boolean selected and our string selected team. And again, this is has a little red squiggly because we haven't declared it yet, and we'll explain what we're doing with these two arguments that we're passing into this function when we actually create the function. So now we're going to do the brunt of our code here. So we're going to say if, an if statement. So this is in a normal application that we had done in previous chapters. This when we'd be saying if is numeric and if the value is greater than 0 and all that stuff. We're not going to worry about that right here. All of that's going to be handled in these two functions. So right now, all we care about is if our Boolean number and team is valid, now Boolean dive selected is valid. And if those two things are true, if these functions return true, then we're good to go. We're going to do all the work in these functions. So I'm going to say if, put some parentheses in here, DLN team is valid, and I've selected. So what we're doing here, if Boolean team is valid and Boolean drive is selected, we could say if Boolean team invalid is true, is equal to true, and Boolean dive selected is equal to true. But just by saying if this and that is just doing the same thing, it's just a little bit of shorthand. It's going to save us a little bit of time, a little bit of typing. And I love saving time typing. Okay, so if those two are valid, then take our int team size that we've declared up here. And we're going to convert it. .32 team dot text. So we've done all this in previous chapters. This line of code shouldn't be too different to you. And we're going to get our location. So location choice. And we're going to get that from our combo box. And we're going to get the selected index, and we're going to use that to call a function below where we're going to calculate our costs. Okay, so now we're going to say select, do another case statement. If you were not familiar with case statements before this chapter, you will get familiar with them in this chapter because there'll be lots of opportunity to use case statements. I like them. They're pretty clean. So we're going to say select case int location choice. We got our location choice up here. And then we're going to say case 0. Case 0, we're going to set our this. So we're already getting our total cost now, but we're not going to do anything yet to code our total cost. We're just going to call a function. So desk total cost is equal to, we're actually going to do three separate functions. One function to calculate our Australia dive cost, one to calculate our Belize dive cost, and one to calculate our Fiji dive cost. And those will be very, very similar. So we'll be able to create one of them, copy the code, and just tweak them um, for the specifics for each calculation. So it won't be too much coding. All right, so this total cost is equal to, we're going to call a function. Australia dive cost. And this is going to have three arguments that we pass to it. Int dive choice. And when we have multiple arguments, we separate them with a comma. Team size and int length. Okay, so we're going to pass these three arguments to this function and then do a bunch of calculations inside this function, and then the function is going to return the actual cost. So what I'm going to do to save myself a little time in typing is I'm going to copy this whole line of code, and then we're going to say case 1, space, and I'm going to paste this code, and our next one is going to be, actually just notice Australia dive cost. And this is going to be function Belize dive cost. And so they all have the same arguments. 2, paste that in, and this is going to be our Fiji dive cost function. Why do I keep wanting to spell Fiji with a G? Fiji dive cost. Okay, and again, these are all coming over with red squigglies. We hover over it, it says function Fiji dive costs is not declared because we haven't created it yet, and that's just fine. All right, so after our end select, in between our end if, we are just going to display the dive name, the dive cost, and the length of the dive, which are going to be returned here from these functions. So we'll put a comment in, display the cost of the all right. I'm going to say LBL 5 dot text equal to just display the label dive and str. Select a team for this one. Cost. Cost. And then we're going to add our desk total cost that we calculated up here. Convert it to a string, and then we're going to format it as currency. See here. And then our length. Length. Oops. Text equal to and we're going to concatenate length to string, and we're going to concatenate hours on this. So we'll say length is however many we selected, hours. All right. So I think this is it for the code for our button dive cost calculate click. But we still have to write this function, and these three functions. These three functions are going to be very, very similar. These are going to be a little more work. We're just going to declare these down here. All right, so the first one we're going to write is our function for validating the number of people in the team. And the only thing really different in this one is we're going to use a try catch. Again, try catches is just for catching errors because a user can enter a non-numeric number, a user can enter all kinds of things in here. This is we're going to do a lot of the things that a lot of our validation that we would normally do in our button, we're going to do it all in here. So it kind of makes this a little more simple if we can do our validation in here, and then you can reuse this function later on. All right, so let's get into it. So private FNC. What just happened? Let's undo that. Private function. I don't know what just happened there. I think I clicked on my trackpad for a second. So FNC validate number in team. And with functions, since it returns a value, we have to declare it as that value returns. say as Boolean. Enter, and I'm just going to put an end function in here. Oh, you know what I did wrong? Put it inside our sub procedure for a button. That's why it was giving me that error. So it needs to be, can actually put it right here. So let's put all our functions and our procedures in the same place. So you can't declare it inside. I didn't move down a line enough. So I can put it down here, anywhere that isn't inside um, another procedure. So I'm just going to put it right here. So when I paste that here, so now I'm not getting those errors anymore. And if I look at this code, function validate number of team now doesn't have the red squiggly under it. We don't have any code in here yet, but we're going to get into that in a second. All right, so let's start writing the code in here. Actually, let's put our comment in first. Validates. Team size. Simple comment. So dim int size as integer. And Boolean validity check as Boolean. I'm going to set this to false as its initial value. We're going to assume it's not valid. Dim number team. This is just an error message for us. Please enter the number of in your type team, and we're going to tell them 0.2 to 6. Oh, that's what's going on. I am not plugged in. So my computer is telling me that my battery is going to die. Just give me a second. Let me plug this in so that I don't lose any work. And that's a good reminder for me to do a quick save all, just in case I did lose my work. I could come right back here. All right, so 1926, good. And then we have our error message, or just our word error for our message box. We're going to be putting a message box in here. Yep. Message box title. All right, so now we're going to get into our coding. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to do a try. And you'll see when I type in try, it types the rest of it in here for us. So we're going to add a little bit more to this. But what we basically do here is we try to do something. If an error happens, we catch it and display a message, and then we end it. So it's kind of almost like I always like to think of these as an if statement. Um, so what we're going to do is we're going to try to convert our team size from our text box int team size 2 and 32 team dot text. So we're going to try to convert it. And if any errors happen here, we're going to catch them down there. We're going to do a little bit more validation in here, though. So after we've determined that it is a number, so we don't have to do is numeric because we're going to be catching that down the exception. So this is a little cleaner for us. So we know it's a number at this point if we didn't have an exception. So now we can just check if the team size is between 2 and 6. So we're going to write an if statement. We're going to say if team size is greater than equal to 2 and team size is less than or equal to 6, then we change our Boolean validity check, which we're going to be returning at the end, to true. So initially it was false. It's false up here. We're going to change it to true if the team size is a number, and if our team size is between 2 and 6, we're going to change our validity size equals to 2. So else, we're going to display a message box. We're going to use our number and team message here. So this isn't an exception, so we have to put the else down here because we just want to tell them to enter a number between 2 and 6. We're skipping the middle parameter and we're just, so we put 2 commas in, and then our string message box title. And then we want to go back and set the focus on team. We want to clear out that team text box. So we have that. And now we can uh, capture for our exceptions. So we have three basic exceptions that we can capture. Um, so we'll say catch EX as format exception. And in the case of a format exception, what do we want to do? We're just going to do what we did up here. Copy these three lines of code. Going to be doing the same thing, displaying the same message box and clearing it out. And we could do something different if we wanted to, depending on what the error was, but we really don't have to in this case. Catch exception as, and we also have an overflow exception that we can, and we will just paste these three lines of code because we want to display the same message box with this message. Please enter the number of people in your dive team. And then probably want to do a catch-all system exception in case anything else happens. We this is just if anything else happens that's not a format exception or an overflow exception. You never know what can happen in there, so you put a catch-all system exception, and it'll handle everything else. And then if it's something that's happening frequently, you can go in and change this message and make it more uh, customized to what's going on in a particular error. This, and the last thing we have to do with this function is return our Boolean validity check. And that's it for that one. All right. So now we've got to write another function. So let's go down here. So we're going to be writing our function for validate dive selection now. So we're going to do that right here. Private function FNC validate dive selection. And we have a couple arguments here. How many do we have? Two arguments. And these arguments are going to be by reference. So that means we can change the values of these arguments within the procedure. So we've got our end function here. And we have to declare this as an integer because we're going to be returning an integer. That's why I've got that squiggly, I think. Yeah. Okay. So Let's put our arguments in here. We're going to be, oops, where did I go? Let's find my function. There it is. So let's put our arguments in here. So we have to tell them that we're passing these arguments by reference here because we're going to be changing the value. So we're going to say by ref, which is not the default. BLN 5 is Boolean, comma, by ref. String dive as string. We're going to use a try catch in this one as well, but first let's put a comment in. Sure, the user has selected a dive type. That's really all we're doing here. Clear our dive type. Okay. Do our good old try. We're going to try to convert our dive type. Dive type is equal to convert 232 and make sure we've got something selected in our list box. So we're going to say LST 5 dot selected index. So that just grabs the value that's selected, and we're going to put it in an integer. If nothing's selected, you can have nothing in there, and then we're going to catch that exception. And then we're going to pass that value back. We're not really passing it back, but it's by reference. So we're going to be setting that value. String dive is equal to LST dive dot item. So selected item is different than selected index. Selected index is the 0, 1, or 2. Selected item is the actual value in the list box. So when I get that value that's in selected item, put it in the string dive, and then that's going to go with this value, since it's a by reference value, it'll kind of be returned. It's kind of like returning it, but not really returning it. And then we're going to set Boolean dive true. And then we're going to just use a system exception on this one. And all we want to do is tell the user to select the dive type if they haven't. And I'm going to put a message in the message box that just says error. And we're going to change our Boolean dive equal to false because there was an exception. So we want to return false if that's the case. And then down here, we are going to return our int type. All right. So that's that one. The last thing we have to do is write our three cost functions, which are going to be very, very similar. We'll just have to change the cost value. That's pretty much it. All right. I'm not sure how long I'm into this video for, but I'm just going to keep pushing through. You see now, let me just back out of this. The only thing we have errors on is our three functions for the dive cost. So once we're done this, those will all be gone. And we'll be able to finish up our application. All right, so let's get into this. We're going to say private. We're really only going to write one of these, and we're just going to copy it, so this won't be too bad. Function C. Oops. So private function Australia dive cost. What do I do by val? Dive. Integer. How many arguments do we have here? 1, 2, 3 arguments. So int dive is integer. By val. Team is integer. And the last one is by ref. Time. Integer. And then we have to say as decimal because we're going to be returning decimal. And function. Right? So no errors here. And if we go down to our button, we should see our Australia dive cost no longer has a red squiggly. So now we just have to write our code in here. This one isn't too bad. 10 or 15 lines of code. For our team cost, decimal. Cost decimal. And then we're going to declare our cost of our 3 dives. This is given to you in a specification. So this is something, depending on the case you're working on, you'll have to look up. Australia, Australia, back one as decimal. It's going to be trying to read the value here. Looks like it's. I'll go back to my specification just for a second. Okay, so that looks like it's 359. Not sure why they're declaring these as decimals. Don't think they have to, but we'll go with what's in the book. And I'm going to save myself a little time here. Retype this over again because we have 3 of these. I have 1, 2, and 3. And it is 359, 200, and 125. Okay. We're going to do our select case. A lot of select cases here. And int dive, we've passed in here as an argument. It should be values of 0, 1, or 2. So if it's case 0, set our desk team cost equal to desk Australia dive 1. Case 1. So you can copy this line of code. This is 2. 2. Oops. Paste that again. And this is going to be 3. So we're just setting these 3 variables we set up there. And we also have to do the time on each of these. So int time that we passed in here is equal to, and we're going to use class variable that we set, int, and this is our 8-hour, and this is our 6-hour, and this is our 4-hour. Got our end select here, pull this up here, and we calculate our final cost. Say this final cost is equal to this team cost times team. And then we just return our desk final cost. All right, so that's our Australia dive cost function, and we're going to have to do that 2 more times for Belize and Fiji. So again, to save myself time, I'm just going to copy this whole function down a couple lines and paste it. And we're going to change this to Belize. And it should have the same parameters here, which it does. So all I have to change in here are my costs for this dive, which is 280, 225, and 200. Oh, no, I was wrong about that one. I'm looking at the wrong one. Belize is, we only have 2 dives in Belize. And they are 200 and 150. So we can get rid of case 2. And this is going to be Belize. Variable names. change your variable names here. Just changing Australia to Belize since we copied it. And we probably have to change our hours. We have an 8 hour and a 6 hour, so we're gonna have to change that. That's fine. And that's all we have to do for that one. So I'm gonna copy this again. So I'll copy the first one again because the other one has 3. And this is our Fiji. Put this one below here. Net cost. These 3 Australias to Fijis. And our 3 Fijis are 280, 225, and 200. And we just have to change these to Fiji as well. And our hours are 8, 6, and 4, so we're good here. All right. This is pretty much it. We don't have any more errors. So the last thing we need to do is code our clear button, and then we are done. So you clear up the form. All right. We want to set CBO location. Dot text equal to select location. So we're just going to put that value back in there. Team, clear that out. This box, clear that. List dive dot items. Clear. And then label scuba dive, label cost, and label length. Did I do that somewhere? Thought I cleared these out somewhere. Just looking to save myself a little bit of Yeah, I guess we just did it here. We set them visible. I guess I'll have to do a little typing. That's okay. I hate typing. All right, so label scuba dive. Set all of these equal to blank. Cost, length, and then so bunch of objects visible equals false. This is where we might have done something similar up here. Yeah, we did. Team, we'll select. Yeah, it's not exact. I guess we'll just type it again. Just looking for places to save myself a little time from typing because I hate typing. But sometimes you can. If I can just copy a list of things that are exactly the same from somewhere else, I will. But if I have to like go through it and figure out what's different and what should be in there and what shouldn't, it's more work than it's worth. So we won't do that. LBO team dot visible false visible false. Five. Button dive cost. False here. Scuba dive. Cost. And label length. All right, so we should be good here. That is the last line of code we have to type. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to run through it, um, compile the code, and first I'm going to save, of course. Save all. I'm going to run the code. We'll enter a couple of values in there. And then I think I'm going to run through it once with you with a breakpoint, just so you can see it calling all of the functions. So let's give it a try, see if we did everything right here. All right, so we select the location, Australia. We have three in our dive team, and we want to go to the Tiger Shock dive. We click dive cost. All right, so it was three in our team. Our cost is $600, and we're going to be diving for 6 hours. So let's clear that out. We'll do another selection, Fiji. So we have, let's test our errors. We have 8 in our dive team, and we click found some channel. Should, yep, so we get an error. Please select the number of your dive team. Okay, so let's hit just 2 here. Good. So Fathom Chasms, $450. And then let's clear it out and we'll just try Belize. And we'll do 6. We'll go to Rainbow Reef. Our dive cost is $900. That seems about right. We'll clear it out. All right, so this looks like it's working okay. So what I want to do now is we want to see what happens when we step through this. So I'm going to set a breakpoint, put my breakpoint right in this function, and we will watch um, as we step through the code here, going through all the functions, going through all the validation. Okay, so the breakpoint shouldn't fire until um, until I hit this dive cost button. Okay, so now we are on, we've already gone through these lines of code. We're going to jump into our function validate number and team. So I'm just going to hit F11 and it will jump down to that function. Oops, what just happened? I think I hit the function key. All right, let's try this again. F11. Hmm, let's stop this. We may not be able to go through this in debugging because my laptop is behaving oddly for some reason. Try it one more time. Let's see, 3 in the dive team, Great Barrier Reef, dive cost. So I should be able to hit F11 here normally and step into the code, but for some reason, oh, I see what it's doing. Keyboard top row, function hidden key, so I have to define a keyboard manager. I think if I hit this, it'll let me, let's try this. No, you know what I have to do? I think I have to hold the function key down and hit F11. Yeah, so that's what I have to do. So if you're debugging on the laptops are a little weird. It has some, so you have to hold down the function key to step in. So I'm holding down the function key and hitting F11, and it is now stepping through that function validate number of team. It's going to do the try. It's going to go to the team size. It's going to set the ability check to true. Return my true validity check. It's going to go down to the validate dive selection, jump into that function, set the dive type, won't hit any exemption, so it's going to return that. Now we know both of these are valid because I returned, so it's going to jump into team size, location choice. It's going to grab our location choice. We selected Australia, so it jumps into our Australia function, sets our 3 dive cost values. We selected 0, so it sets our cost and our time, calculates our cost, my cost times my team, returns the final cost, comes down, sets my three values here, and then should return my control. So when you're working with functions and you're not that familiar with them, this is probably your first time working with them, it's not a bad idea um, to go through and debug and watch it step through into those functions and go through. Because as you're coding these in the chapter cases, you're probably going to make some mistakes, pass your parameters wrong, do your functions incorrectly, and really the easiest way to figure out exactly what's going on is to breakpoint and debug. And a couple of you, I had an opportunity to sit down with you and help you debug some of your programs, and it's going to become even more important as we get to more and more complicated applications like this one. So this is it for the Chapter 7 guided program walkthrough. I will talk to you later.